Success in the corporate world. And of course, some people might now think, oh, corporate is bad enough, but how to make it there, I don't even know. Maybe it's just coincidence, and maybe it's not. We have an expert exactly on that here with us today. Hello and welcome, Edward Bjurstrom.
Nice to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for taking the time, and we get straight into the interview. You wrote the book, The Success Guide, and let's face it, many people write these kind of books. What was your motivation to write The Success Guide, how to thrive in the corporate environment? So it's very specific about the corporate world. What was your motivation to do that?
Well, I wanted to capture what I might have learned in the last 40 years working in the pharmaceutical industry. Um, Hopefully, it would help others avoid some of the mistakes that I made. And in uh, in crafting the title, I was very specific about thriving in the corporate environment rather than just surviving, we're built to survive. But it's kind of a negative orientation. I want people to thrive and enjoy what they're doing and do it well. The other thing is I wanted to describe how to thrive. There's a whole lot of books that'll tell you, what you should do, but not very many will tell you exactly how to do it. And that
Yeah.
was my real focus.
Yeah, excellent. And I look at your CV. I mean, you've been vice president operations, Gilead Sciences, board of directors, etc., etc. I mean, let's face it. When we talk about the corporate world, you use the word thrive. Many people would rather say, "I'm actually happy when I just survive the week." Basically, my next goal in mind when I wake up on Mondays, next goal in life is Friday. So how can you talk about thriving when many people are on the level of barely surviving the corporate world at the moment?
Yeah, well, that's, the whole point. One of the things really is your mindset about your environment. It should be exciting to go to work. It should be kind of a thrill to accomplish good things that, the company is working towards. I had the blessing of working in the pharmaceutical business, making life-saving drugs. And that was a privilege, and it was exciting. And yes, there was lots of challenges and problems and difficulties.
Hmm.
But the idea when you have a problem, a setback, or a difficulty, then embrace it as a learning opportunity, and rather than feeling like you're a failure.
Excellent. So one of the main parts you talk about in the book is that you say that self-awareness is extremely critical. Probably many people are now listening to this and say, I can tell you five leaders immediately off my brain right here who have absolutely no perception about themselves, how the team thinks about them, how everything works around. They have a completely different perception of reality. So can you elaborate on the self-awareness, especially how can leaders actually really become more self-aware? Because many struggle with that.
Yeah, that's true. I've met many people who were profoundly not self-aware. So what happens is if you're self-aware, then you understand how you affect the people around you. If you're not, you end up behaving mostly in a self-centered way. It's kind of an ironic thing. You're not self-aware, but you're really focused on yourself, which is interesting. But the behavior of a person who's not self-aware will, and oftentimes, destroy relationships, destroy trust, and they're not even aware that that's happening. And so, how you can build self-awareness is, first of all, you have to develop a realistic system for getting feedback from the people that are around you, your peers, your direct reports, whatever, in a way that you can get honest feedback. And when it comes, it's more important when you get feedback to embrace it, to accept that you need to change. And if you get feedback and you just ignore it because you don't like it,
Hmm.
that's worse than never asking for it in the first place. But how can you actually improve and do better and adjust your approach to interacting with people unless you get real good feedback? And the big problem is that the higher up in an organization you go, the less likely people are going to, give you the bad news, especially if it's about yourself.
Hmm.
So
So, how can you encourage to give them the bad news? Because many people fear when I give the bad news. I mean, we all know with the bad message, usually it's the messenger who faces the first negative consequences of that. So, how can you encourage people to actually give you the negative feedback without having the fear of retaliation?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's what I mean by a system for getting honest feedback. So, what you really need is a trusted person to collect the information for you from at least, three or four, even a half a dozen folks or more, and strip off all the names and anything that might identify who the feedback came from. And that's fair, so it's not exactly anonymous. You know the people that, you reached out to, but you don't know the exact comment from any one individual. And it would be a serious mistake to try to go around and figure out who said what.
Yeah.
What you want to do is understand the feedback and really embrace the idea that you need to make some changes.
Mm, excellent. So when we now talk about this, many people say, look, with all of what you say, I agree. However, we have so many challenges and distractions today. Change of strategy, then there is AI, then there is this trend, and that basically every time I try to focus on anything, someone says, no, we have something new for you, and this is the flavor of the month for June 2026 or any other date. So how can people actually focus when we have so many challenges and distractions today? How can I actually focus and increase my productivity?
Yeah, with the invention of kind of the iPhone, we ended up with a computer in our pocket, and that was thought to be a great thing, but it's actually brings a lot of distractions to everyday life. You get notifications, and then there's email and interruptions. So there are two kinds of interruptions or distractions. First of all, there's internal, and then there's external. So the internal is your idea that you want to stay connected, and every time you get a notification you need to shift your focus to your phone or your computer versus what you're working on. The external is when people come by and trouble you with inane ideas, or they just want a piece of information, or your boss comes by. Those are external. And what you really want to do, if you want to get good work done in focused period of time, first of all, you have to carve that out in your schedule. You have to protect that. And so whether it's closing your door, hanging up a sign, do not disturb, or whatever for, an hour or hour and a half or 2 hours, so you can get some very focused, important work done and let it be known. And so you got to communicate that to the people around you. And
Mm,
also, you have to turn off all the notifications on your computer, your phone, and resist that temptation to shift your focus, because it might take you 10 or 15 minutes to get back to where you were with one single distraction. So in a 2 hour period, if you're distracted three or four or five times, you pretty much have lost the opportunity.
mm. Excellent. So, and one thing I saw on your CV, which I found really interesting, was for a certain, because many people might now have the impression, okay, maybe this is some American, rich family, Harvard bachelor's, Stanford master's, doctorate maybe in Yale afterwards, and then all the doors were open. And when I looked at your CV, it's not one of these CVs, it's not one of these rich family people here. You are all open doors. And you even led an organization in Puerto Rico, which is not that common. May you talk about that area? How did that shape your view of leadership? What did you learn from that experience leading an organization in Puerto Rico?
That was a great cultural experience. Completely different from living in California. I'm in Tennessee right now, but
Yeah.
at the time I was from California, and living and working in Puerto Rico, only about a third of the island actually speaks really fluent English.
Hmm.
And so I had to learn Spanish actually while I was there. In that process, learning a language, as many of your listeners would know, gives you insights into how people think. So that was really insightful to me. The other thing was when I arrived there, the facility was not in good shape. It had a number of problems. I had to make a lot of changes, and including letting some of the leadership team go. And Puerto Rico is somewhat of a familial organization. Relationships are really important. So I was not considered a good guy at first. But
Hmm. Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, but the thing that I really learned there was I was able to really uh, connect with the people and gain their trust by doing meaningful things that let them know I cared about them. And that all the changes that I was making was to ensure the success of the organization and the future of their jobs. And so, after a couple of years when I left, they gave me a big party and obviously showed great appreciation for what I was able to do there. And because they came to understand that it was really for their benefit as well.
Mm. Excellent. And in your book, you also cover the subject of flow. You say it's part of increased productivity, which it is, by the way, for anyone listening right now. Some people always think that flow is something esoterical. It is not. There's scientific evidence to it. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi from the University of Pennsylvania Wharton Business School has a professorship there about this topic, one of the leading business schools, universities worldwide. So, what would you say for people who are probably not too familiar with this topic and who heard, yeah, flow, something like that exists, and I think people work somehow in the flow, but don't really know what that means. Can you explain what it is and why do you think it is important?
Yeah, it is important. And it's really the easiest way to understand it is a state of mind where you're absolutely and completely focused on an important task.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and there's, some important parameters that allow you to get into that. First of all, you can't have any distractions because that just kind of destroys your ability to focus. But there's a couple other things. There has to be some risk, something that's really important that you're trying to accomplish. And if you don't accomplish it, there's some risk associated with that. That helps you stay focused. The other thing is what's called the challenge skill balance. If the challenge is much greater than your skill, then you'll be anxious and you're not going to really get into that flow mental state. If your skills are much greater than the challenge, then you kind of get bored and you're not likely to
Yeah.
really stick with it either. And so it is an enjoyable thing where you're so focused on the task that time kind of seems to stand still. I believe that everybody has this experience occasionally, and people who really understand it try to cultivate that by carving out time to really focus, eliminate distractions, and get some really important work done in a really short period of time. And I'll tell you what happens if ever you're in a situation where there's a real emergency, something comes together that's a real big problem, and you bring a team, and it's the kind of situation where everybody checks their ego at the door, all the petty differences go away because they're dealing with such an important thing. That's an opportunity to really get some great work done, and a lot of that is because of this concept of flow. It's a mental state of supreme focus, increase creativity and problem solving. And I've often wondered, why is it that we need to have an emergency or a crisis in order to have such a great team interaction and get good work done?
Mm-hmm. Excellent. I have a bonus question. Are you ready for a bonus question?
Oh, sure.
Yes, so I'm going to give you my opinion first because otherwise I think the audience might judge you. I can tell you I experienced flow during my career when I worked in pharmaceuticals and IT, and that's my personal opinion, I worked a lot of hours. I didn't grow up naturally with a free enterprise background. I come from a public service family, and I worked long and hard hours to get myself into the industry. First pharmaceuticals, then IT, and I enjoyed that thoroughly. When now people say, "Hey, I'd like to be vice president of operation of an international corporation as well," however, due to personal preferences, I prefer to work 4 hours a week, 35 hours maximum. Do you think that thriving in a corporate environment with senior vice president or higher career is compatible with, let's say, strong focus on limited working hours? And then I'm not here for rage bait or just causing anger or judging certain generations. I'm just genuinely interested in your opinion because you can probably now derive my opinion. Because in my opinion, the more hours you put in, the more you learn, and the experience grows your network as well. That's just my personal opinion. I'd like to hear your take on it.
Yeah, that's actually a great question. Unfortunately, in the corporate environment, a whole lot of time is wasted.
Hmm.
A lot of people are, just kind of going through the motion. They get to work by 10 in the morning, the wheels fall off and, they're in conflict with their peers and they're not getting anything good done. One of the big innovations in recent times is this idea of remote work. You might be able to get 4 hours, in a remote setting, what you might get done in 8 hours, back in the office. So it's a complicated set of circumstances, but you're absolutely right. To me, working was a joy. Um, yeah, I did put in long hours for many years. I'm retired now, and that's why I wrote the book to try to
Yeah.
capture what I learned. But realistically, life is a learning experience. I think it's the most enjoyable thing is to learn new things. It expands your ability to understand people and systems, and so I embrace work. I spend a lot of time, even now, doing interviews and working on my second book.
Excellent. I'm going to have a question on your second book, of course, at the end of this interview. One aspect which I find fascinating in your book is you mentioned something which is still pretty new for many leaders. You talk about storytelling. And often leaders say, look, storytelling is something for the marketing people, for the sales department. I'm leading people on operations and need to get things done, and I don't need storytelling. You have a different take on that. Why do you think that leaders need to be good storytellers?
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing. I enjoy telling stories. The value that the leader has is, if you can tell a good story, especially if you're dealing with, let's say, change or difficulties, telling a good story to your people actually gets to people at the heart level. You can give them a lot of facts, but that just rolls off. People don't remember that. But, if you give a compelling, riveting story with details that are memorable, it sticks with people. And you can explain difficult things through a story that get past people's defenses and that they can actually really understand it. And so, there's a there's a kind of a recipe that Hollywood has certainly embraced about how to put a good story together. There's always a there's always a hero, there's always a villain, there's a quest and a guide, the most important thing. And realize that your employees who actually do the work are the heroes,
Hmm.
not you. You're not, you might be the guide. Hopefully you're the guide to help your folks actually get good work done. But they're the heroes. And if you have that attitude, you'll you'll encourage your people greatly.
I think these are great words here. So when we now come to a close of this interview, and people think, okay, I really like to thrive in my corporate environment. However, I really don't know where to start. What is your one action that people can take this week to begin thriving rather than just surviving at work?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is um, manage your emotions. You know, um, that's all part of self-awareness. But the one thing to do, just concentrate on asking good questions to understand. In difficult circumstances, people tend to just react. Instead, ask a good question like, why do you think that? Why are you upset? Some simple things that calm people down and that give you an opportunity to begin to dialogue about what's really going on.
Mm.
And asking good questions has been one of the, I call it a secret weapon for actually managing various circumstances and giving you the open door to understand what's really happening.
Excellent. So, the success guide, How to Thrive in the Corporate Environment, available right now, written by you, Edward Bjurstrom. And you already said you're writing a second book. Of course, I'm curious about that. What will the second book be?
I like to take some of the things that are in this first book and make it available for younger people. People starting out. The young people are the future of our world, and truthfully, a lot of them might be confused about what really makes it possible for them to succeed.
Hmm.
That's my next focus.
Excellent. And of course, one question I have to ask when now people say, hey, I think we'd probably like to engage you as a speaker or a coach or someone who can help our people. How can people reach out to you?
Yeah. Well, I'm. I have a consulting company, really more for coaching, uh, just let me know, Ed at mountaintopconsult.com. That's
Excellent.
ed at mountaintopconsult.com.
Perfect. I think these are the perfect final words. The Success Guide, How to Thrive in the Corporate Environment, available right now, written by Edward Bjurstrom. Edward, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.